Okay, everyone. Once again, good morning, and thank you so much for taking the time to join the webinar today. I'll just start. Again, this webinar would be recorded, so as you have registered for it, you would receive a copy of the recording. So yeah, let's start. Okay. So before I start, again, I'll just go through some of the housekeeping rules. Um, Please keep your mic muted. I think your mics are muted already. And drop your questions in the Q&A. Again, I would please ask you to keep your questions as general as possible, because we will not be able to respond to very specific queries. If you have very specific queries, please send them to an email that my colleague Frank would put in the chat. Okay. Um, yeah, so we'll take your questions at the end of the session. Okay. On the call with me today, as I said, like I have Frank, but just to introduce myself, I'm Priye Bisina, and I'm the regional advisor for Africa and Middle East, and I will just be taking you through general information regarding making these applications. Again, some countries might have some peculiarities, but there are very similar requirements across the board for making visa applications to Ireland. Okay. So the first thing you need to do, I don't know, I think some of you might have been on the webinar yesterday. I did mention that there is a way to confirm if you require a visa. Okay, so you can click on the Irish immigration website. There'll be a place for you to check if you require a visa. So they have a list of countries. If your country is on this list, then you require a visa to enter Ireland. Okay. But if your country is on this list, you do not require a visa to enter Ireland. But what you would need is once you arrive in Ireland to be able to study in Ireland, you would need to register with the immigration, and that applies to everyone, including those who do not require a visa to enter Ireland. Okay, so the first part of this presentation, I would be talking about how to apply for your visa to Ireland. I will walk you through all the required documents, and then go into detail about what is required for all those documents as well. Again, as I said, like this is going to be like a more general look, and it's just supposed to serve as a guideline for you. But again, if you have very specific questions, you can always reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to um, help you with that. Okay. So the first step to apply for your visa to Ireland is you must complete the application process online. Okay, so they have the AVAT system, and that's on the system you create an application form, fill it out, and then you may also be required to provide biometrics as part of this process. I'll go a bit into detail about that biometrics requirement as well further down the line in this presentation. That form will contain information on how to submit your required documents as well. So to give you information on where to go and what documents you need to have. And I'll go a lot into detail about all the required documents subsequently. Okay. One thing that I must stress before I go over the required documents, I cannot stress this enough. You need to start the process for applying for your visa as soon as you can. I would suggest like the optimum time would be to aim to start your visa application to Ireland by the end of April at the latest. Okay. If you go over the end of May, you run a risk of not being able to start the program because right now, visa applications, depending on the country that you come from, can take between 8 to 12 weeks to get a decision. So I cannot stress this enough. For Ireland, you must apply as early as you can. Okay. So I'll just quickly go through the required documents for making a visa application to Ireland. As I mentioned, the first thing would be to fill out that form. I'll go into detail about what will be included in the form and what you must do with that form in subsequent slides. Then you must write an application letter. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Please do not use a template. This application letter is supposed to be personal to your circumstances. So again, I'll go into detail about what is supposed to be included in that application letter. Then you need an international passport for obvious reasons, a passport photograph as well, and then your firm offer letter from DCU. Again, I repeat, it must be a firm offer letter, which means that you do not have any outstanding conditions. Okay. Then in your application letter as well, you must explain any gaps in your employment or your education. Then you must provide proof of payment of your fees. You must provide a copy of your transcripts and your results and the English language test as well. So again, for many visa offices, this is a mandatory requirement. Okay, so regardless of if the requirement was waived for you by DCU, when you are going to apply for your visa, you must provide one of those tests. I'll go over what tests and what the required grades look like. Then you must provide private insurance. So you must provide proof that you have private insurance, and then you must disclose any past visa refusals. And then you must show proof that you have the finances to support yourself while living in Ireland without having to rely on public funds. One thing that I must stress regarding these required documents is please do not provide any false documentation. If you submit a document that turns out to be fraudulent, you would receive a 5-year visa ban from Ireland. Like, no questions asked, your application will be rejected and you will not be able to apply for an Irish visa for 5 years. And that too could have implications for other countries as well. So please be guided. Please ensure that all the documents that you are submitting are authentic. Okay. So moving on, the first document, as I mentioned, is the application form. Okay, so again, you would access this on the AVAT's online facility, and you must apply for the long stay multiple entry, otherwise known as the long stay D visa. Okay, once you fill out that form, you need to print it, sign it, and date the form. This is very, very important. Okay. Then the next step would be your application letter. Okay. So for this application letter, as I said, do not use a template. Tailor the application letter to your circumstances. So it must include your full name, your signature, and your postal address. You must also go into detail about the reasons why you would want to come to Ireland. Again, in your instance, it would be to come and study at DCU. But again, you think about it that the visa officer has never met you. They do not know anything about you. So this letter would serve as an introduction to the visa officer. So you need to be able to convince them about why it is important for you to come to Ireland and particularly DCU to do the program that you have chosen to do. Again, you can go into detail about your experiences and how that has led you to make that decision as well. And then if you have any family members currently residing in Ireland or within the EU, you must provide their details as well. Okay. And then you must include an undertaking that you will observe the conditions of your visa in full, not rely on public services, for example, public hospitals, or become a burden to the state as well. Finally, and this is also very important, you must leave Ireland. You would leave an undertaking that you would leave Ireland before your immigration permission expires. So again, sometimes it might be um, advised to just copy this part, so in your letter, somewhere towards the end, you just say, I promise to obey the conditions of my visa in full and not rely on public services or become a burden to the state. Additionally, I promise to leave Ireland before my immigration permission expires. Okay. And then you must also justify if your current course is unrelated to your past experience. So I know some of you might be enrolled on some of our conversion business courses, like our management business program, for example. Okay. So maybe you might have done something related to science or something related to engineering, and now you want to gain an experience within management. That is fine, but you must be able to again, convince the visa officer why you have decided to make that decision. Was it something within the education that you did, or something within the professional experience that you have done as well? And again, if you have done like any online courses, any short courses that are related to the program that you are currently doing, that too can go a long way to help to sort of like show a link and give a justification as to why you want to do that particular program. Okay. So strong application letters would explain the candidate's reasons for applying and using their past educational pursuits and employment history as well. Okay. The next requirement or required document is your international passport. Okay, so your current passport must be valid for at least 12 months after your proposed date of arrival. That's very important. And you should also submit full copies of all your previous passports as well. So if you have any previous passports, you need to be able to send copies of all your previous passports as well. Okay. And then your passport photograph, you must submit two color passport size photographs, and you can see the dimensions in here. Those passport photographs must not be more than 6 months old, and you must print your name and your visa application reference number on the back. So you will get a visa application reference number once you finish filling out the form on the AVAT system. So you must include that on both of those passports. Very important, do not staple or attach this passport to the form. It must be free flowing, and that's why they need you to write your name so that they can match it to your application. Okay. And then you would need to have your firm offer. Again, this firm offer is compliant with all that is required. It gives full details of the course that you are enrolled on. It also gives details and the amount of your fees that is payable as well. Okay. And please note that we do not issue any acceptance letter. If you have received a firm offer, that is the final offer letter that you receive from DCU. Okay. I would go into detail about how you can prove that you have paid your fees to DCU in subsequent slides. Okay. This part is also very, very important. So again, as I said, in your application letter, you must go into detail about any gaps in your studies. So if you finished your first degree, say maybe 4 years ago or 5 years ago, for example, you need to be able to explain with documentary proof why, and you need to also be able to sort of like explain what you have been doing within that time as well. So you need to give a full detail of your employment history and you need to provide documentary proof as well. So again, stuff like you provide a CV, you provide employment letters, you provide maybe pay slips as well, things that can just prove like to show like what you have been doing within that time is very, very important as well. Okay. Then the next thing is you need to prove that you have paid some amount towards your fees. Okay. So again, as I mentioned in the webinar yesterday, you need to pay at least 60% of your fees before going to apply for your visa. So as I said, you need to use TransferMate to make that payment because you can receive a receipt from TransferMate. That receipt is one of the documents that you can take with you to prove that you have paid the fees. Additionally, you need to be able to show bank statements, and I'll go into detail about that in subsequent slides. But you need to be able to show a bank statement where the fees was sent from as well. Okay, you must show details of the beneficiary's name, address, bank details, and the same for the sender as well. Please note, once again, we do not issue any fee receipts. As I mentioned yesterday, we would provide a spreadsheet with the information of students who have paid their fees to the Irish immigration so they can cross-check. But on your side, you need to provide like an ETF if you paid the fees as well using like the bank. You can provide like bank tellers or just something to prove that you made that payment. Okay. And then you need to provide your transcripts and your qualifications as well. Okay, so you must provide evidence that you can follow the course that you have chosen. You must prove this by submitting your transcripts and your results as well. Okay. Then again, you need to provide English language tests. Again, the Irish immigration accepts a wide variety of tests. And as you can see, like the requirements are a lot lower than what is required from DCU. So if you have met that requirement already at DCU, then you can just use that same test for your visa application as well. Okay. Another required document is proof of private health insurance. Okay, so you must choose your chosen plan must provide cover for accident and or emergency and hospitalization in Ireland. I know one of the questions that someone asked yesterday was that what if I have an insurance from my country? Again, that insurance must provide cover for accidents, emergencies, and hospitalizations in Ireland specifically. So if your existing insurance does not cover you for any of those things, it will not be eligible. Okay. So there are a lot of health insurance providers who offer plans to international students, including AON, Swisscare, and Study and Protect. Okay. I can like I have used Study and Protect. So when I was coming to Ireland to study, that was one of the services that I used. So once you click on their website, they would present you with a form that you would fill out. And once you fill it out with all your details, they'll give you a quote and then you can get your insurance and that would cover you for that requirement. Okay. Then this is very, very important. Again, like you must provide details of any previous refusals. So if you have ever been refused for a visa application in any country, you must provide details of visa refusals. Okay. You must also provide the original refusal letter if you have that to support that claim. And then if you do not disclose, so if you do not disclose this, your application will be automatically refused. So it's very, very important that you think back to if you have ever been refused, you need to give a reason why you were refused as well. Again, this does not mean that your visa application would not be accepted. I've seen cases where students have been refused from multiple countries, but because they fully disclosed and they met all the other requirements for the Irish visa, they were approved for their visa as well. Yeah. And then you now need to show proof of finances. So this is one of the major reasons why a lot of students are refused for visas to Ireland. Okay, so you must complete that financial summary form. That is a recent addition, and that just gives a quick summary of your financial situation. So again, one thing that I have not really spoken about is sponsors. I would speak about them in subsequent slides, but in that financial summary form, you can give details of exactly how much your fees are. You can now give details of how much money you have, how much money all of your sponsors would be contributing to your studies as well. So again, this gives the visa officer like a very quick snapshot of what your financial situation is, and it gives them a sense whether you would meet the requirements. Okay, so you must show, on top of paying your tuition fee, you need to show that you have immediate access to at least 10,000 euros, the equivalent of 10,000 euros in either your bank account or your sponsor's bank account. Okay. Again, if you can show proof that you have more, that counts for something. Again, this will be proved by you providing a 6-month bank statement for yourself, and all the other sponsors that you have as well must provide a 6-month bank statement as well, right? So this must be on a headed paper. Name, address, account number, and account type must be clearly visible. Again, ensure that the print quality is very, very clear, because I've seen instances where students have been rejected because not because they did not have the funds in the bank statement, but because the bank statement itself was not legible. Like the visa officer could not really see what was in the bank statement. So ensure that the print quality is very, very clear and that it shows all of that. So the visa requirement is that you must also explain any large or irregular lodgements. But I would go one step further and say, just to be safe, explain all the payments that have been made into the bank account for the last 6 months. I know this seems like a lot of work, going through 6 months worth of transactions and providing explanation for all of it. But I can tell you that it is worth it, because again, sometimes it is very difficult to say what large or irregular lodgements are, so no one really knows like what the cutoff is. Again, in most cases, for most bank statements, there will be certain transactions that can be grouped into categories. So, say, for example, like your salaries, for example, can be grouped into one category. So, you can pick out all the instances of your salary and then explain them as one. So you'd say, oh, I received this amount on this date, this date, this date, this date. All of those transactions relate to my salary, for example. So you just go about it in that way. But I would say, just to be on the safe side, explain all the payments that have been made into your account. Again, it doesn't have to be like a long explanation. You can give a 1 or 2 line explanation for it, but you must be able to provide evidence of that. So if there's a receipt, an invoice, anything that can prove like why that money was paid into your account and why you should have access to it, you need to include it. Again, one thing that I would say is the more information you provide, the better your chances of getting it. Because again, going back to that story that I said at the beginning of this presentation, the visa officer has never met you before. They need to be able to understand like your reasonings for wanting to come to Ireland, and you need to be able to convince them that you have met all those requirements. So again, the more documentation you can provide to support your claim, the better your chances of getting the acceptance. Okay. And then, as I said, like, so for sponsors, where sponsors are involved, it must be clear their documents relate to them. So the sponsor's documentation must relate to the sponsors. You must list each person that is sponsoring you as well. As I said, in that financial summary form, you need to list all the people that are sponsoring you, and then you give a euro amount of how much they are contributing to your sponsorship. Okay. And then you must give clear details of their relationship to you. Again, this is not a requirement from the Irish immigration, but from my own personal experience, it is always better if your sponsor is a close family member. So, like a spouse, a sibling, a parent, or like a distant relative, but someone that you can prove your relationship to with documentary proof, birth certificates, marriage certificates, photos, just anything to be able to provide more context about the relationship. And then your sponsors must also be able to write a sponsor's letter as well. In that sponsor's letter, they need to be able to explain why they have chosen to sponsor you for your education. They need to also give information as to like what their relationship, the nature of their relationship is to you as well. And then if the sponsor is someone that lives within the EU or Ireland, you need to be able to provide the IRP card. If they have like an EU passport, you need to be able to provide that as well. Marriage certificate, as I said, birth certificates, just showing that there is a link between you is definitely important. And any claims that they make in their letter must be backed up by documentary proof. Okay. So just to recap, we've gone through all the required documents. Again, for some countries, there might be extra requirements, and I'll go over those in the next slide. But you need to do the application online and print out the form. You need to write your application letter. Do not use a template. You need to have an international passport that is valid for at least 12 months after you arrive in Ireland. Your passport, two passport photographs with your name and your visa number printed on the back. Your firm offer letter from DCU. Explain all gaps in your education or employment as well in your letter. Provide proof that you've paid your fees and that you have, and then you provide your transcripts and results, then your English language test as well, and then proof of private medical insurance as well is very, very important. Then any past visa refusals, you must fully explain those as well. And then you must provide proof of finances as well. Okay. So some additional required documents, particularly for Indian students, would be they need to complete the police clearance certificate and the supplementary student application form as well. So this one is just specific to a few countries, particularly India. And then, as I mentioned at the start, some of you might also be required to provide biometric information as well as part of your visa application. So this refers to capture of your fingerprints and in some cases a digital image of your face. So for most people who will be applying for the first time, you would most likely need to, so residents of China, Hong Kong, India, Nigeria, or Pakistan are required to provide fingerprints as well. And then biometric capture will take place when you submit your documents at an Irish visa application center. It may also be necessary in some circumstances for your print to be taken a second time, and you'll be required to return to the VAC for that purpose as well. Okay. So I know like this is a lot of information that has been thrown at you, but again, we would share this recording with you, and so you can go over it in your own time. Yeah, so the next step, and this applies, as I said, to everyone, whether you require a visa or not to study in Ireland, would be to register with the immigration. So if you are a citizen of a country outside of the EU or EEA, you must report to the immigration when you arrive at Dublin Airport. And then you must register with the Immigration and Service Delivery Department, right? So you need to apply for an IRP within 90 days of your arrival. Okay, so to register, you must make an appointment by calling that number on the screen. And then once you book an appointment, you receive an email telling you what documents you must bring. During your appointment, your documents will be reviewed, your photographs and fingerprints will also be taken, and you will also be required to pay a registration fee of 300 euros. Okay, so some of the required documents are your international passports, student confirmation letter. So you need to be able to show that you have registered fully at DCU. Okay, and then proof of finances for students who did not show that for their visa, proof of payment, and private medical insurance. Okay, so for your international passport, a copy of your biometric page, of your current valid passport, and this page that shows your passport, passport number, and date of birth. Then your student confirmation letter will be a letter from your college or school that is dated on or after the date your course commenced, confirming your enrollment as a student. You can request this letter from our registry page. So once you arrive in Ireland, you can request for that letter from our registry department. Okay. And then you must provide proof of finances. So if you need a visa to come to Ireland, you do not need to provide proof of finances after you arrive here. However, if you did not need a visa to come to Ireland, you must prove that you have direct access to, I think it's about 4,500, if you are staying more than 6 months. Okay. And then proof of payment, you must show that you've paid at least 60% of your fees. Again, if you've done this, if you've applied for your visa, you already have all those evidence, and then evidence that of this will be visible in your letter of enrollment as well. Okay. And then finally, your private medical insurance as well. Okay. So these are some useful links. Again, I would suggest that you go to irishimmigration.ie. From that website, you can get all the information in more detail about applying for visas. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our email as well. But we will go through your questions in the chat now. Okay, these are some of our upcoming webinars. We will be doing a refresher as well for offer holders and visa applications in between as well. So you can feel free to register for those as well if you need more support as well. Again, be sure to keep an eye on your email for registration links for our Going app. We'll be launching that sometime this month, to be a very good way to meet your peers and plan and prepare for your arrival at DCU. And then feel free to follow us on our social media as well. Thank you so much for listening. I will pass it over now to my colleague Frank to just go through the questions, and then I'll take some of them.
Thank you so much, Freya. Yeah, we covered a lot, and a lot of the questions came in early in the webinar. So I think you might have you probably answered a lot of them already, but we'll run through some of the main ones. I've answered some of them quickly in the chat.
That's fine.
Some that could be kind of typed out. But obviously there's a lot of repeat questions as well, so we'll try group them into groups. So and then we're not going to take any questions from people raising their hands. So if you do have questions, just put them into the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So one I think that comes up all the time is, if there's a delay in the visa approval, will DCU extend the date of joining?
So that would depend largely on your faculty. Okay, so if you believe that you might resume later than the resumption date because of a delay in your visa, I would strongly suggest that you reach out directly to your program chair. You can find the details of your program chair on our course pages, right? So they will be able to tell you how late you can resume. In most cases, most faculty would only extend your arrival for 2 weeks. That's why I keep stressing that the sooner you can start the process of applying, the better your chances of getting it. I can see one question about the Government of Ireland scholarship. Yes, the Government of Ireland scholarship, if you get that, that should be sufficient proof. Again, they will give you a letter stating that they have given you the scholarship and what that scholarship includes as well. So you can take that with you as proof, but you would also still need to provide a copy of your bank statement as well as part of your application. Okay. And then for students who are waiting for the scholarship, again, you cannot make the visa application before you pay your fees. So I would suggest that you wait for the decision of the scholarship to be concluded before you go and apply for your visa as well. Okay.
And then there's another one, Priya, just if they
Mhm.
need a letter of acceptance, or does the offer letter work?
Yes, as I said, the offer letter is the firm offer letter is the last offer letter that you would receive from DCU. So that firm offer letter is what you would take with you to apply for your visa. But again, to prove that you have paid your fees, you need to include your ETF, bank teller, or transfer receipt as well.
Um, and then there's a few questions around that the people have been waived for English language requirement. I'm guessing for DCU due to doing their bachelor's through English or English being their first language. Um, so
Yeah,
do they also have to then get an
to
English
do.
test for the visa, or is there a way to use that waiver for the visa
Yeah.
as well?
From my understanding and from speaking to multiple visa officers in multiple countries, they always still say that regardless of if it is waived for you by the university, you need to provide one for the visa application. So I would just suggest one of the ones that you can consider would be Duolingo. It's not as expensive as the other tests, but and again the requirement for the visa office is significantly lower than what the university requires as well. Okay.
Um, and then there's a few questions about gaps, and I've answered a few of them in the chat, but is there kind of like a limit or a minimum number of days or months for the gap to need to be explained?
No, there's no official limit of gaps that need to be explained. Again, if you have been out of university for whatever period of time, you need to be able to explain what you have been doing within that time as well. So whether it is 2016, 2015, 2020, 2022, you need to be able to explain what you have been doing with documentary proof as well.
Um, I just remind as well, so we won't take questions that are very specific to people's cases, just as if we do that, we'll spend a lot of time. So try keep your questions as general as possible. So we're not going to come to questions that are very specific. If you have specific questions, please email them to the email that I've put into the chat, and we'll answer them in the time after the webinar.
Okay.
Um, so there's a good few questions about the health insurance. So I think Priya went through that in the webinar. Priya, I don't know if you want to just give another quick summary of the health insurance.
Oh yeah. So again, like there are multiple health insurance providers within Ireland. So the one that I would say you should look into would be Study and Protect. Again, once you fill out that form, and you yeah, once you fill out the form with all your information, it will give you a quote, and that would meet all your requirements for the visa. So once you pay for that, yeah, I think it costs around, let's say, from 160 all the way up to about 250, something like that. So it will be somewhere in between. And it's been a while since I checked the website.
And then
Okay.
for anyone that's kind of waiting for mark sheets or transcripts, they say maybe
Mm.
that will come in June or
Yeah, yeah,
during the
yeah,
summer at some point.
yeah.
Um, is it possible to get some sort of workaround to apply for their visa earlier, or do they have to wait?
So one thing, and but this was just from one particular country. One thing that they said was that they understand that sometimes students might be waiting for their um, final transcripts. So maybe just as a way to ensure that you are on the queue for the visa, you could submit all your other documents with all your proof, and then maybe in like your letter, you could explain that you are currently waiting for your final transcripts. And once that is ready, you would provide it. So again, like one thing that you can now do is you can ask them at the place where you go to submit your documentation if that would be possible for you to do. Like if you can come back to drop it. So depending on what they say at that AVAT place, that is what you will go with. Okay.
And just one other piece to kind of that question is if they get the certificate of completion while they're waiting for their grades, is it possible for DCU to kind of make their offer unconditional, or do they have to wait for their actual grades and
So yeah,
transcripts?
they need their actual grades, because again, like most times the conditions will be very, very specific. They would say you would need to get a specific grade to meet the conditions. So again, if that letter of completion can say, okay, this is the grade that you'll be finishing with, then maybe it will be up to the admissions team to make that decision. But most times you probably need to get the final transcripts to be able to get the final offer.
And then there's a couple of questions about people having firm offer letters for January 2025, and I'm guessing they've deferred or they're coming to in September. Do they need to get a new offer letter, or can they submit the January one?
No, so yeah, they need to get a new firm offer that states that they will be starting in September. Because if you go to the visa officer with a letter for January, they would wonder like January is already in the past. Like, so how can you start a program in the past? You need to get a new offer letter. So if you've deferred your offer, the admissions team would send you a new offer letter for whatever time that you deferred it for. Okay.
Um, then do fixed deposits more than one work for proof of funds? I'm not sure
Sorry, do
if
what? Do what?
do do fixed deposits. I'm not sure if I'm not too sure what that is, but
So fixed deposits, it means that you probably not be able to withdraw the money for a certain period of time. That would not count as proof of funds because they need to see that you have immediate access to the funds. So there cannot be any restrictions on you being able to withdraw the funds, you know. Yeah.
and then if somebody is doing maybe like a graduate visa in the UK or a different country, can they apply for their student visa from there, or do they have to return back to their home country to do it?
I don't see there's no reason for them to return back to their home country to apply. If you are legally resident in the UK, you can start the application process in the UK. But again, you must breach all the requirements, including that English language requirements. I know a lot of people have asked me that question about, oh, I did my first degree within the UK. Can I, apply without the English language exam? Okay, so I would speak about it from my own experience, but I would also speak about it from having conversations with visa officers. When I was applying for DCU, this was in 2019, so it's a very, very different time from now. I did my first degree within the UK and I was able to submit my visa application without an English language exam. But right now, what the visa officers always stress is that regardless of whether it is waived for you by the school, you should provide an English language set. So you can prove this by doing that Duolingo English test, as I mentioned, or you can do any of the other ones. Again, you can see the requirements for those English language exams on the website. So as long as you meet those requirements, you should be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions around that. of people have been waived, or if people have studied in English,
Yeah,
still
yeah.
needing. So I think that should clear up all of them questions. Um, and then
And there's
so I
a
think yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, there's a question about someone saying I have previous visa refusal to the US 2 times. I have visa refusal letter. If refused under 214B, I'm not sure what that is. Can I address the issue while applying as for Irish student visa? Again, as I said, regardless of what it is that you were refused for, you need to disclose that you have been refused. Again, if you also have a visa ban from any country, you must disclose that as well. Again, in most cases, those things would not impact your application unless, like, it just depends on what the reasons are. But again, if you can address those reasons in your current application, if you can show that you've met all the requirements for the visa process in Ireland, then you should not have too much of an issue. Okay. Someone is asking about the validity of the student visa in Ireland. Okay, so that visa that you have applied for to Ireland, it's always like an entry visa. Okay, so it just gives you permission to enter the country. That is why I keep stressing that once you arrive in Ireland, you have 90 days to register with the immigration office. Registering with the immigration office would give you your Irish residence permit, and that would allow you to be able to leave Ireland and come back as well. Okay, and typically that residence permit is always valid for 1 year. So when you apply for it as a student, you get a stamp two, and then at the end of your program, you would move to a stamp 1G. Okay.
Um, so there's a few questions about the course commencement date. So we don't have that yet, but as soon as it's live and we do know it, it'll be posted on the website and everyone will be let know about it.
Yeah.
I imagine that would be in the next couple of months,
Yeah.
and the date will be somewhere around the start of September. But
Yeah.
an exact date will be given once it's confirmed.
Yeah. Someone is
Um,
asking about if they need to purchase flights to apply for the visas. No, do not purchase flights or um, hotels or anything before applying for your visa. Just apply for your visa, and then once it's approved, before you go and apply for your visa. Yeah. Okay.
um, and somebody's asking if EU student residence permit can be used to enter Ireland.
EU student resident permits. So again, you would need an Irish residence permit to be able to enter Ireland. EU student resident permit would be specific for that country. I don't think there's a general EU student residence permit.
There's a few questions around the €10,000 and the proof of funds as well. So is that a total amount including, and can it include student loans, sponsors, that sort of stuff?
Okay, so again, as I explained, like what the finances they entail two prongs, right? So you need to show that you've paid your fees, either 100% or 60%. You also need to be able to show that you have the balance, like that's the 40% as well in your account. On top of that, you need to be able to show that you have 10,000 euros at least towards your other living expenses. Okay, so it's show proof that you've paid your fees and then extra 10,000 towards your living expenses. Okay,
And can
so
that
that money, yeah.
10,000 be
Mhm.
made up of loans and money from sponsors?
Yeah, yeah. So student loans, they count as well. As long as you can show, okay, this is the student loan that I've received and all that, all those information. If it's your sponsor as well, it can be in your sponsor's bank account. But again, the sponsor needs to be able to explain what they do for money and why they have chosen to sponsor you as well. Okay.
Um, so somebody's asking about how they can enroll for the accommodation lottery. So that will open on April 1st. You do the application through their website, but we'll be hosting a webinar at the start of April with somebody from the accommodation team who'll go through that in full detail.
Yeah.
So be sure to attend that if you want more details. So there's a lot of people asking about the Irish education bond as well. I don't know if you have much information about that, Priya.
Yeah, so I've heard about the Irish Education Bond. That too can count as proof of funds, but the immigration officer still needs to see where that money was paid into the bond. So again, if you have 10,000 euros in an education bond, it will have come from a bank account. So you need to be able to show 6 months bank statement of that bank account and then showing that transaction, leaving that account into the education bond as well. And then you need to provide explanation for how you got the money and things like that. So education bond can stand, but it can't stand on its own. You still need to be able to show where the money came from and how you have access to the money.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. That should cover off the questions about the
Yeah.
Irish education bond.
Mhm.
People are asking as well about, do the visa documents need to be submitted in the portal, or do you have to be physically submitted at a visa center?
Yes, so in most cases, they would need to be submitted physically at a visa center. Okay. So again, as I said, like you need to print out the um, application form, and after you finish completing that application form online, to give you details on where you need to go to submit your documents. Okay.
Um, so I'm just trying to see if there's any more that we haven't covered off yet. Um, so somebody's asking, I know it's slightly unrelated, but it's people who don't get university accommodation. So for off-campus accommodation, there are websites like daft.ie, rent.ie. We will be having a webinar with our students' union as well. We'll be going through all the information about off-campus accommodation, how to avoid scams, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So please make sure to attend that as well. And
Mhm.
you'll get more information on how the best way to go about finding off-campus accommodation.
Yeah.
Um,
So someone here is asking, can I apply for the visa by paying 60% of fees from my own funds and later apply for refund if I receive the Government of Ireland scholarship? How will this affect my visa application? Again, if you choose to make the fee payment yourself, then you would be, I guess, standing as a sponsor for yourself. So all the requirements you need to provide. Again, you cannot say that, oh, I have applied for the Government of Ireland scholarship, so I might get it or something. So again, I would suggest that if the only way for you to fund your fees is through the Government of Ireland scholarship, um, then you need to hold off. But yeah, if you pay your fees, and you eventually get the Government of Ireland scholarship, that fee would be refunded to you in most cases, I believe. Okay. Any more? Okay,
um,
so someone is asking, sorry, will I need to show proof of accommodation during the visa process? I have a place to stay in Ireland off campus, but I don't know how I could show that. So again, like you in your application, they will probably ask you about like your accommodation situation. So for me, when I was coming, I used like a temporary accommodation. Temporary accommodation, um, is perfectly fine. I use like an Airbnb in my application. So if you have a place to stay with friends, you can include their um, address in your application. But again, they do not expect you to have like confirmed and paid for accommodation as part of your application. I hope that makes sense.
is there any rule, Priya, about they
Yeah.
can only apply for a visa 3 months prior before a course start date or not before that? Or is there any rules around that?
And so again, for most of the visa, like Irish immigration offices, they do not start processing particularly student visas until April, right? So once it's April, in most places, you can start making applications for student visa. So again, I'm the only saying that you should apply at least 3 months or 2 months in advance because there can be visa delays. There are a lot of applications. The number of students interested in Ireland from all over the world is increasing, So the sooner you can start the process, the better your chances of getting a response on time. And again, another I guess added benefits of applying on time is that should like in case your visa gets refused, you could apply for an appeal and still get a response in time in some cases before the program starts. So that's another thing that you can think of as well.
Um, and then there's a few questions around the student loan again. So if the funds are 100% from the student loan, will it affect the visa approval? And also, can the remaining 40% of their fees be shown via student loan?
Okay, so if you are got 100% student loan, you need to provide all of those information. I feel like what the visa officer will probably want to understand is like how you plan to pay that loan back. So again, I'm guessing as part of your loan application, you probably will have provided those details as well, so you'll be able to make that explanation as well. But it will be up to the visa officer to make the determination. I won't be able to say 100% if it will have any adverse impact, but I know that a lot of students use student loans as part of their application.
And then can that 40% remainder of the fees be shown via sponsorship or student loan?
Yes. So if you have a student loan again that covers the remainder, then by all means do that. Yeah. And again, like if you have the 40% already from the student loan, you might as well just pay 100% of the fees and show that you've paid all of the fees and that you got the money through a student loan, things like that.
Cool. Okay, we're coming up on time, so we might just see if there's any last questions that we haven't covered. But I think we've covered
Most of
off
it, yeah.
everything. There's been a lot of questions, but I feel like we've covered most things. Again, if anyone has remaining questions or questions very specific to their case, please send them to the email that I put into the chat at the
Yeah.
start of the webinar. We will
Yeah.
also share a recording and hopefully share the slides as well with the links for you guys to kind of look back on in your own time. Um,
Yeah.
so can they apply for visas this month?
Uh, no, I do not think they can. So you need to just wait till April to apply. But again, just start gathering all your documentation, get everything in order, and just be prepared. As soon as it opens up, then you can start the process of applying for your visa. Okay,
Um, So yeah, I can't see any questions that we haven't covered.
covered. Yeah,
Um,
that's fine.
if there's
Uh,
any final questions that people think we haven't covered, maybe quickly put them into the chat. But particularly around visa stuff, as well as a lot of questions on other topics.
yeah,
There's a quick question on going. So yeah, we will send an email out towards the end of this month with all the details for going. They'll have the registration details, how to use the app, all that sort of stuff. So again, it'll be similar to the email you got about this webinar. Just keep an eye out, and you definitely will get that. The recording as well. Yeah, the recording, as I was mentioned, will be available afterwards, so you can look back on this in your own time. Particularly around when you're submitting your visa application. And you'll get more information about it there. Um,
yeah.
I'll just have a quick look at the end, see if
Mhm.
there's any new questions. So I use my master's transcript in the UK for my DCU application. Will that transcript be okay for the visa application, or do they need to add the bachelor's degree as well?
Yes, so you need to add both your bachelor's degree and your master's again, just to explain, I guess, like what you've been doing within that time. Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so
Yeah, I think
ca
we've answered most of the questions.
can they ask the university for a written document that states that they need 10,000 euros for hostel and other living expenses, as what bank asks for proof?
Um, so the university is not asking for the 10,000 euros living expenses. That is a visa requirement. Again, you can find information about the cost of accommodation on dcuaccommodations.ie. If you go to the international section, again, we'll be doing a webinar about on-campus accommodation, and there they'll go over the fees as well. But yeah, no, the university will not be able to provide you with any letter stating that.
Um,
Okay, someone is asking about like what reasons the Irish visas are usually rejected for. So a lot of things that come up. Finances are a big one. So not being able to show proof of finances or payment of fees, um, not being able to show as well, like or explain your gaps in your education can come up as well. Not being able to show like why you want to do the program or why you qualify for that program as well. And things about like relationship to your sponsor not being fully explained or not having like an obligation that you are not going to rely on public funds or leave Ireland at the end of your immigration permissions in Ireland as well. So the main things that you need to be focusing on are your proof of finances and all the documentation that can support the claim that you are making as well. Okay.
um, one question, can a cousin be used for one of the sponsors?
Yeah, a cousin can. Again, you need to be able to show proof of the relationship, birth certificate of maybe yourself, birth certificate of the cousin, maybe birth certificate of the parents, and birth certificate of your parents showing that you have the same name and things like that. Their passport, biodata page, your passport biodata page, and then in their letter as well, they need to be able to explain like, oh, how long they've known you and why, what are the motivations for wanting to support you as well. Okay. Yeah, I think, okay, so can a friend with a stable income be shown as partial sponsor? Okay, so this one is a bit tricky. I would say it's not possible, but it's tricky because from the perspective of most visa officers, they would not understand like why a friend would want to sponsor you, like stand and sponsor you with like a significant amount of money. Again, if you can make a clear explanation about like how long the relationship has been and what the motivations are for wanting to sponsor, and they can provide evidence of okay, this is how much money I make and this is why I can sponsor. You could try it, but I would advise against it if you can help it. If you can get like a more close family relative, that could be more sufficient. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's just one question, and then I think we'll wrap it up. Um,
Yeah.
so they've just asked it a few times. Can we file a visa on a conditional basis, and then after getting the transcripts and degree, the visa can be removed from hold? Does DCU have this system? So I think that's just a bit confusion on who the visa is processed with.
So yeah, the visas are not processed with DCU. They are processed with the Irish immigration. As I mentioned, you can try it. Like if you know that there's going to be significant delays in getting your final transcripts, you can book an application for your visa, take all your other documents with you, and then at the point when you are about to submit it, you can ask the person that will be receiving your documents that you have a conditional offer from your university and you've included a note in your application letter as well, and that you would want to start the process of applying for the visa, and then once you receive a firm offer, you would like to. So they will be able to let you know if that's possible. But yeah, that could be something that you could try to do. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. We're just about 10 minutes
Yeah.
over time. But thank you so much everyone for joining. As I mentioned, we will send a recording and the slides out to everybody, so you will have access to this afterwards. And if you do have any outstanding questions, just email them to us and we'll be happy to get back to you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.